Starting that stream, starting that dream. There we go. Just getting in here. New Pragmatic. Hi, everybody. Making sure the YouTubes is all fired up and ready to go. And there it is. There it is. We're live. CouchBot typically follows here in just a couple of minutes, but you know we're gonna go ahead and head out the station. It does look like the YouTubes is struggling a little bit. Encoder. I'm just gonna let this work through for a second. See a little lag on YouTube, so okay. Well, it says it's fine now. Let's see if it clears up. Yeah, it looks like we're fine. We're back. YouTube had a hiccup. That's fine though. I always like making sure that we've got a solid connection before we get this thing moving out of the gate. But that said, greetings one and all. Chris Courtney here. New Pragmatics. Time for the feedback loop. Day before the election. A lot of work being brought in this morning. Gosh, we've got Bren's in, Ricardo's in, Maddie's in, Abby's in, Eddie's in. Five this morning. So it's great to see everybody moving in a lot of different directions. So we're going to try to address everything as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let's get this started. Let's start here with Bren. Bren, obviously, she's been working through her user interviews and affinity mapping, and you know, the user interviews are really just there for, the documentation to make sure that we've got everything. And as you can see, one of the great things about using Otter AI is that it produces a record of everything that happened during her interview, so it makes it really easy to go back and pick out the bits of that interview that were really beneficial. And Bren decided to use Miro for her affinity mapping exercise. And in Miro, in Miro, the affinity mapping, it basically provides this template, and the weird thing about the Miro board is just the way the Zoom kind of works. It provides this template. It's very similar to how the Figma affinity mapping exercise is set up. The priority for Bren here is she set the focus on curriculum, then engagement, and then social. And this was all via a distillation of her material that she basically, I just want to walk you through this. She started out, she started out with a bucket of content that was all just, here's all the post-its from my resources. And then she began splitting them up. We were working on this together last week. What's the data that I've collected that is specifically online focused, in-person focused, and then we had this third bucket that was funding. That was the three major prongs where things went, and then in each of those, we had there were problems with funding that basically generated out, and then there's certain things in that bucket that weren't really issues. Then there were observations, and one of the interesting things about these observations was the in-person observations had an impact on the online concerns that were found. There were also problems with in-person learning as there were concerns with online remote learning, and then there were also teaching concerns up here at the top. So overall, that is what the distillation, so this is the first cut, this is the second cut. these two cuts basically are what ends up powering the priority, because it's not that you end up with it's not that you go with, which one has the most post-its. That's not the key. The key is, okay, which one seems like, which one of these, now that we've distilled it out, would have the largest impact on the success of the system. And the system in this case is the education system. So she's chosen to drill down on a curriculum, and I think that's great. Setting up the priority for the other things is really key, but obviously for this particular exercise, we're only going to push our solution into focus on that first cut. Okay, so this is really good, Brent. I'm glad to see you working through this. The personas that you have down, you've got this persona chart down here. To be completely honest with you, this is really not all that different than the persona outlines that were provided in Figma. Although I think that the persona outlines that are provided in Figma are a bit more focused on actually building the persona. This is like another sticky note exercise. So I would shy away from that one and focus on the template that's provided over in Figma. And that's obviously the user interview. So I'm going to close both of these. I think you're in a great position to move forward. And that's what you turned in affinity mapping and the interview assets. So I think you're good there. Ricardo is a number of things here. You got your typography exercise, grids, and you've also updated the layout. So let's come over here to Figma. So Ricardo, you're doing a lot better job here just looking at like the crop that you produced for this one. I like seeing you get comfortable with having space, okay? One of the big problems that we have coming from print is this idea of we've got to fill up every single square inch of every pixel has to have something in it, and that's just not true. Flexible designs really require us to understand that making everything perfectly fit is probably going to be a bad time. So we need to get used to working with bits of space. Now, whether you come in here and you say, okay, this is going to be at the top, or this is going to be at the bottom, or it's going to be centered up, that part of it is really more of a preference call. I think any one of those three can work. Me personally, I'd probably go a little more like this, because basically with like CSS, with like Flexbox, you could just set it up to say, okay, whatever the height of this picture is, and if the picture got smaller, and obviously don't squeeze it like that, but if the picture got smaller, this would move in concert with it. But this is, these considerations are where you begin marrying the digital output with how you're thinking in terms of designing this. Right now, we haven't exposed you to enough of the digital output side of things. We're just getting you used to space and grid structures and how big are things online, okay? And that's a big enough leap in and of itself. We will begin to layer in what the digital output of this looks like. And when I say digital output, I mean like code. What does that coded output of this look like, and what should we be thinking about responsively? And of course that's what I was kind of hinting at down here last week. Because there are ways that this works over here. Just got a glimpse over here that this isn't going to work. This idea of the fade with the bit of type over the top of it here, that's going to be fussy beyond the payoff when it comes to writing that out. Like this is some z-index stuff, and then there's some opacity, and you might have to do something specific to the image. The headline can ride there, but there's simpler ways to do this particular layout. But again, we haven't pushed you into a position where you're thinking in terms of digital output yet. Although I would say that I would pretty much never do right alignment on typography of any real length, just because it's difficult to read. Like the I starts here, then the I has to move out, then the I moves in, then moves in. Like you want that clean line. Like this would be actually perfect for if this was a language that read right to left instead of left to right. Like you would see right alignment in Hebrew, for instance, where you read across the other way. But in terms of reading left to right, that's why the alignment is always on that left side. All right. You're still a big fan of the fade. We'll work on that. Let's go over here and look at your grids. Okay, so just what we're looking for here. Can you find the margin? Can you find the columns? No big surprises there. I always mention because I think it's necessary. Sometimes you want to point out areas where the columns do not line up, like right down here. Like this is 5 columns across. That doesn't line up with your 6-column design. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. I'm going to frame the selection so that I can then put a grid on it. And in putting that grid on it, I'll make it into columns. So there's a 10-column design, and I'm just going to knock that up so we can see it. That's a 10-column design. I'm going to try to figure out why it's got this. Yeah, let's hide that. This is a 10-column design right here. When you put it over the top of the grid structure, you can see it's really also a 5-column design. That works. But when you go to, if I change this to 12, this 12-column design lines up with a 6-column design. So, this 5-column design down here doesn't neatly work. So we have to have some other way to think about it. And this is, again, when you begin thinking about code, what we would do here is we would probably have a unit that we call a container. And the container would have the width of the page in mind. And that's this margin, okay? But this container would then have other shapes within it, okay? And if you're looking at this design, you'd probably have a container that goes down the length, and then you would have a shape here at the top for this little nav bar area. And I'll just add some color there. So you'd have a container, then you have this shape, then you have this 3-column shape just below it, and that's another section that's being constrained by this container. But in this particular case, and to put a grid on something, you have to frame it. In this particular case, this is a it's a 3-column grid, right? We'll put 30 on it, and then we'll get rid of that. We'll hide that selection. So now you've got your 3-column grid here. Well, this one down here is basically another 1-column structure that's been split into 2. I'm not really going to say it's 2 columns because there's no break between these items. So I'm just going to say, okay, well, this is another section. And this section goes here. It's about that big. But then, as we saw a minute ago, there's this one down here at the bottom. And this is actually a 5-column grid. Why does that matter, Chris? Well, it matters because we have to think about how would we build this. At some point, we have to begin thinking about it's not just a 3-column grid all the way down. These are separate parts of a greater whole. What's holding the greater whole together? The margin. What's inside of that? Separate sections with different grid structures. Okay? Provided that you understand how that these are different pieces, it makes it easier to conceptually hold it together when we have a discussion later about, okay, well, this grid this item has to actually break that grid. So what that means in that case is we have to end this container, then we have this item come in, and then we bring that container back and we put it back into play below, and we continue on with our day. So I share this with you because I want to paint a picture for the thinking you're going to have to do later in the program. Does it matter right now? No. But being able to see how you might break this, actually it's right here. It's actually right here at the top. We already have broken this. We've broken this container right there. It's right there at the top. I'm just going to change the color here so you can see it. But the container actually starts inside right there and goes on down. And this is like they've put a negative margin to kind of move it up, and they've used Z index. So, so again, did you figure out the grid structure? Yeah. But is there more to it? Yes. And I'm trying to layer that in so that when we get to that point where we're working through this in a layered manner, you understand, you can see it on screen and go, oh, I know how that's built. Okay? And once you begin to understand, oh, there's something happening in the code underneath that makes it easier for you to either do it yourself or work with a developer. All right? I just need you thinking on that plane. And right now we're just thinking, okay, this is the grid. All right? Over here on exercise part 2, this is pretty straightforward. You've created a grid, you've applied it. Although you've got like a double grid here, I don't think you really need the second one. And my big question here is, are these aligned? And they are. That's nice. You've gone through and kind of resized things as you go. So these are smaller and this one's bigger. But my big thing here is I don't see anything where it's like that and then like this, and it has some structure to it. This is definitely not a perfection exercise. This is just saying, hey, you got some shapes. Can you create a grid and do something with it? And you did. So we're gonna move forward from there. And then finally, typography 101. All of these are right. Again, one of my favorite things are X height and baseline. You need to be like white hot aware of those for every bit of typography you ever work with. Also, open counters, the counter size, stroke modulation. When I talk about stroke modulation, I'm talking about when it goes from skinny like this to very wide. Typography that has stroke modulation can be easier or harder to read depending on how much difference they have. First case in point is this one right here. There's lots of stroke modulation in this. It goes from very skinny to very thick, and that's why it gets very hard to read this as body copy by comparison with Roboto. But Roboto is very boring because there's no stroke mod. It's mono. All right, it's just monotone all the way through. A little bit easier to read is IBM Plex. It does not have the same amount of modulation. You can look here at the H. The H does go down pretty narrow, but it's pretty wide overall. You can look at the O's, and it's not geometric. Like you can see where that O just kind of like cuts itself off, won't allow itself to go out any further. So you've got this down as you can use it as anything for Roboto, headlines only for Didot, and IBM Plex, label and paragraph. I would argue that you could really do anything you want it to with these two. I would probably stay away from Roboto as a paragraph text, simply because as it gets into longer passages, it just becomes very monotonous to read. I think IBM Plex, you can make a case for using it in all instances, but it is a bit of a it's a bit of a judgment call. The big thing that I'm looking for in this particular exercise is, do you recognize this as being hard to read as paragraph text? Because if you do, you're going to at least avoid that problem. And getting into dainty fonts that are really, that have really small attributes to them, where they, where they, and the form connects together, I think is, if you can identify that that's going to be problematic, you're already ahead of the game. All right. So good job there, Ricardo. Let's hop back over here, and I believe we're over here to Maddie. So Maddie is working on her portfolio, and I yeah, that's way better. Gosh, that's way better. So last week we were looking at this, and Maddie's nav that drops down here was really dark, and I'm glad to see that's been updated. It also matches with the tones that I'm seeing elsewhere in the design. I did want to take a look at Burt's Bees. I know you had you said you updated the annotations, and that's slow loading. Hope our stream is still up. So let's come through here. Annotations, I believe, we're a little further down. Okay, yeah, that looks really nice. A, B, C, D, A, B, C. Oh, this is still an image. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second, because when I envisioned what you would do here, I saw this A, B, C, D. I saw this actually in like regular text. Like this would be an image, and this would be 4 columns of text underneath that image, so that when this collapses down in mobile, this text does not get shrunken down. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, you see what happened? The same thing is, like, the same thing is happening to your design that was happening previously, except it's just not off to the sides. I really would love to see this more in text like this. You've written this out in other areas. I mean, this text would be just fine underneath this. I'm guessing. Yeah, this is pretty much the same thing. Yeah, same thing. So I appreciate the annotations. I don't think that we've really solved for it in the direction I was. It's like took one step closer, but it's still one step away. Let's also take a look at this. So business of baby food product. Let's come over here and growing Gerber, business of baby food. All right. Looks like we might have an error there. The styles look nice though. Yeah, see, I like this because, this is, when this comes down in size, like this is still legible, even though the image is shrunken a bit. I'm okay with that. I think that works by comparison with where we're at on that other one. Oh yeah, I remember this one. Okay, so and this is the same sort of trapping. Yeah, so I would say that the same thing here with the annotations. I highly encourage to get these out of. I would try to get these out of the image itself. On mobile, it's like this is less concerning, I think. These are together, so it's going to shrink. I was thinking that these were going to hold together as one column things, but they're actually built together as 2. So that's a bit problematic, but again, it's still better than where you were. But I would encourage you to, like, try to split these apart so that you're not in that scenario where it's going to take this image and cram it down on a phone. Um, yeah, that's kind of where I leave that. Okay. So that's Ricardo. Um, that's Maddie. That's Maddie, and leave some notes there. Eddie, I'm going to come back to yours. You're in Wicked Problem Land, and Wicked Problem is always a bit more of a word exercise. I saw what the Wicked Problem was, but I want to refer back to that directly in the commentary here. And then Abby, you've included your outline for the presentation. Abby's at the end of UX, working through the presentation, and so the real focus for presentation is what are we building, why are we building that, who are we building that for, and what are we doing to get it done. So I see what is important. I see organization, easy transition, and access to Wi-Fi technology. I want to focus on what you're building. All right. So these other things, less concerned with them. Like I want the white hot focus to be on what is the thing that you are building. Like why is that important? And right now I'm seeing organization. I don't know what that means. So I want to see you if organization. If you're saying that we're taking all these resources and bringing them in, and we're making a two-way portal. I need to know what I need you to tell me what that is. Just organization could be like organization, us as a group, or you're just saying we need to be more organized. I need you to come out and say you need more organization, so we're creating this thing. Why are we creating this thing? Because you have to have a structured learning environment. You need students and teachers to be on. So the why it's important, I see that. Who it's important to, I see teachers, I see students, I see parents. So who is it's important to, I see that. I see the why, I see the who. What I think you need more detail up front on what are we doing? What is important? Organization is important, so we're building this thing. Why are we building this thing? Because. Who are we building it for? These people. And then you had what do we need to get started? So is that referring to the school admin stakeholders or as us as designers? So I believe what we need to get started is really what are we doing next? Okay. The next step in this process is we're building out a prototype. We're going to build out a prototype that we're going to test with users. We are doing more user interviews. We have built the thing, and we've built our beta version of it, and we're now going to start rolling it out January 1st. I don't know what that next step looks like. You have to come up with what you're going to tell the people. You're not looking for permission, though. Okay, you have secured. You are the agency. You are saying this is what we're doing. Here's our check-in, and here's what we're doing next. All right. So keep that in mind. What do we need to do to get started? Collect, analyze, step in the right directions, follow-up interviews to see. Create basic wireframes to show a visual idea. Yeah, I would push this forward. I would push forward on these bottom three. I don't think these top two matter so much. But these bottom three, we're now creating a visual form to push this forward so we can begin testing our work. All right, that's the key. So a little more focus on the front, like paint out for them what the hell you're building, and then on the back side of it, focus in on and we're building this and we're doing this right now. Not we need your permission to do. Don't think like that. Okay, you've done the research. You're checking in with them. You're just informing them, hey, here's what we found, and we're doing this now. Okay? All right. All right. So, yeah. That's going to do it for today's edition of the Feedback Loop. Let's see. Bryn, Maddie, Ricardo, Abby, Eddie, I owe you a check-in. Otherwise, yeah, great. It was great seeing five kicking off November in style. Could be the most stressful week of the year, and you folks are just running into it. Gangbusters. Love it. That's the spirit that I'm looking for. If you have questions, you know where to find me. I'm going to see some of you later this afternoon. I'm waving at you, Eve. And the rest of you, I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Go vote. Take care.